Can you for 1 second envision that a painting of a man being flayed alive hangs on the walls of your local city hall? To make things just a little bit worse, can you imagine that it was your local city council who commissioned this painting in the first place? What appears to be completely absurd in modern times was actually quite normal during the late Middle Ages. Those were the days, weren't they? This painting is known as the Judgment of Cambyses and was painted by Dutch-born painter Gerard David in the year 1488. The narrative of the painting is focused on the central themes of justice and honesty, and the painter used an ancient story to convey the message. Once you know all the details about this graphic work of art, you'll understand just how disturbing it really is. David was born and raised in the town of Oudewater, which is situated in modern-day Utrecht in the Netherlands. His exact date of birth is unknown, but it's believed to have been during the 1450s. He likely traveled to Italy as a young man, and that's why his style reflects that of Italian painters from the early Renaissance period. He settled down in Bruges during the early 1480s and became the leading painter in the city about a decade later. It's here that he painted this horrific painting. As I already mentioned, it was the local city council who asked David to complete a series of paintings to decorate the walls of the local city hall. The purpose of these paintings was simple: to show the city's population that the high-ranking city officials were not corrupt. Although it was initially titled The Last Judgment, the painter decided to deliver this message by painting a story mentioned in a work titled Histories, written by ancient Greek historian Herodotus. The story is about as deprived as it gets when it comes to punishing corruption, and it's likely that David was the first painter of the Northern Renaissance to tackle this subject in his art. The story took place during the reign of Cambyses II. He was the son of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC. The left panel of the painting depicts the moment that Cambyses arrested Sisamnes, a corrupt judge who accepted bribes to influence his decisions. Just above the scene in the foreground, you can see the crime taking place as he appears to be secretly accepting a bribe. Further in the distance, several people witness the event. Cambyses had zero tolerance for corruption, which is essentially a positive trait. He was, however, a cruel and deprived individual who immediately sentenced Sisamnes to be flayed alive. The right panel depicts Sisamnes, who is strapped to a table. The graphic details of these paintings are haunting, to say the least, and the judge surely wished he hadn't accepted the bribe just a bit earlier. It's clearly him because the red coat he wore on his throne can be seen lying below the table. This is an important notion in the story, as you'll soon discover. The executioner just finished cutting up the corrupt judge, and others are assisting him to flay the helpless man while he is still alive. While you look at this painting, it's quite easy to understand why the citizens of Bruges gained a little bit more confidence in the honesty of the city magistrates, don't you think? Just when you think that the story couldn't get any more disturbing, you can see what initially appears to be a rather normal sight in the top right corner. Upon closer inspection, you can see that these are the same tiles on the floor as in the left panel. Sisamnes' throne also looks very similar, except for one terrifying detail. David painted the successor of the executed Sisamnes sitting on his throne. Remarkably, Cambyses chose Otanes, the son of Sisamnes, to take the place of his executed father. No big deal, you might think. It's possible that the son wasn't as corrupt as his father, but there's actually a gruesome twist to this story. After Sisamnes died, Cambyses wanted his flayed skin to be cut up and turned into leather strips. He then ordered this leather to be used to drape the judge's throne. Just to constantly remind Otanes not to follow in his father's footsteps. I think that worked out just fine. In order to make the message of the painting even more powerful, Gerard David painted this scene as if it took place in his native Bruges. The area has obviously changed quite a bit during the past 500 years, but it's fairly certain that these were contemporary buildings situated near the city hall. Above the throne in the left panel, you can see that David inscribed the year in which the painting was completed, 1488. The clothes worn by the people surrounding the corrupt judge were also clothes worn by people in Flanders at the time. Although we can't verify this, it's likely that he used famous local people as models. This means that it's possible that several city magistrates, whom this painting tried to intimidate, are witnessing the man's flaying. There was nothing wrong with David's painting skills as well. If you zoom close enough, you can even see a reflection in the soldier's helmet of the scene in the background. This is a huge painting, but the level of detail he captured on these oak panels is quite amazing. Yes, Gerard David was a worthy successor of Jan van Eyck, one of the most talented painters of the Northern Renaissance. Now let's get back to another remarkable element which I already mentioned, the red robe worn by Sisamnes. This was the type of red robe that contemporary judges wore in the late 15th century. This detail almost goes unnoticed by us, but it would have surely made a big impression on contemporary viewers. After all, the red coat of the corrupt judge lies below the table that he's being executed on. Now here's an interesting notion. Gerard David was likely the first artist in Northern Europe to depict the story of Cambyses and his corrupt judge Sisamnes. He wasn't, however, the first to complete a commission for a city hall which had the aim of stopping corruption. Dirk Bouts, an equally influential Dutch-born artist from the 15th century, painted a very similar work over a decade earlier. Titled The Justice of Emperor Otto III, these two panels were commissioned by the City Council of Leuven in modern-day Belgium. The composition and purpose of the paintings are so strikingly similar that it's almost impossible that the Judgment of Cambyses wasn't influenced by it. The story of this equally terrifying painting goes as follows. Otto III, the Holy Roman Emperor in the late 10th century, had a count beheaded who was accused of trying to fool around with his wife. After he was executed, it came to light that the Empress might have lied about this, so she was forced to hold a hot iron bar, known back then as the Trial of Fire. She remained unharmed by this, and as seen in the distance, her trial by fire was quickly replaced with the Ordeal of Fire, which she obviously didn't survive. Now here's a grisly detail. The subject of justice was highlighted because it was the emperor who sentenced his own wife to death for lying, which is pretty brutal. Unlike Bout's paintings, which are on display at the Old Masters Museum in Brussels, David's painting still hangs in Bruges. It hung at the local city hall for many centuries and was only briefly taken to Paris during the French Revolution in the late 18th century. Today, you can find it at the Groningen Museum in Bruges, which also houses several other masterpieces of the Northern Renaissance, such as this enthralling painting by Jan van Eyck. Finally, I want to tell an interesting anecdote about the Judgment of Cambyses. Right next to the City Hall of Bruges, there's a wonderful Renaissance building known as the Old Civil Registry. It was completed in 1534, about 46 years after David finished his painting. If you look closely, you can see that one of the carvings on top features the flaying scene depicted in the right panel. This can lead to no other conclusion than that the painting had the desired effect. But then again, it's hard to imagine that there was still any form of corruption after this painting was put in place.